Marcus Okonkwo froze behind his tinted car window, watching something that made his blood run cold. The word cut through the afternoon air like a knife. A poorly dressed woman selling groundnuts had just grabbed the arm of a CEO's son outside Nigeria's most expensive school, and what she said next would cost a father everything he thought he knew about raising a child. "You will apologize to that woman, now." The boy's face twisted with confusion and defiance. "But my papa says people like her don't—" "Your papa," the woman interrupted, her voice gentle but steel-hard, "is wrong."
Fair African Tales. Subscribe and turn on the bell for new stories.
Marcus Okonkwo stood at the window that morning, his phone pressed to his ear, closing a $12 million deal before most of Lagos had finished their morning prayers. 42 years old, self-made, Forbes Africa's Tech Visionary of the Year, and completely, utterly in control. His reflection in the glass showed a man who'd won at life, tailored Ermenegildo Zenya Sweat, Richard Miller watch catching the early sunlight, jawline sharp enough to cut through boardroom resistance. Behind him, his 9-year-old son Chidi sat at the breakfast table, iPad in one hand, ignoring the carefully prepared meal the housekeeper had laid out. "Chidi, eat your breakfast," Marcus said, phone still to his ear, not even turning around. Multitasking was his superpower. Present but absent. There but not really. "I don't like this," Chidi announced, pushing the plate away with the casual cruelty only children and CEOs can master. Patience, the housekeeper, a woman in her 50s who'd worked for the family for 3 years, reached for the plate. "I can make you something else, young master. What would you like?" "Something that doesn't look like poor people food." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Patience froze. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the plate of a kamu and a kara, the same traditional breakfast she'd lovingly prepared, the same meal Marcus himself had grown up eating in Mushin before money changed his address and, apparently, his memory. Marcus ended his call, barely registering what had just happened. "Chidi, don't be difficult, we're late." Not an apology, not a correction, just logistics. Patience's eyes met Marcus's for half a second, a silent question he refused to answer, before she turned away, carrying the rejected meal back to the kitchen like she was carrying something much heavier. This wasn't new, this was normal, and that was the problem nobody wanted to name. The drive to Green Springs International School was Marcus's one concession to fatherhood. 30 minutes, 3 times a week, when his driver had the morning off. 30 minutes when he could pretend he was present in his son's life, while actually reviewing documents on his tablet and fielding calls on Bluetooth. Chidi sat in the back of the Mercedes G-Wagon, AirPods in, eyes glued to his phone, playing some game Marcus had never bothered to learn the name. "Big presentation today," Marcus said, eyes still on his tablet. "The Singapore investors. This could triple our valuation." Silence from the back seat. "You have football practice after school?" "It's called soccer, Papa." Chidi's voice dripped with the kind of exasperation only children of the wealthy can perfect. "And no, that's tomorrow." "Right, soccer." Marcus made a mental note he'd forget by lunchtime. They pulled up to the school gates, and even the entrance was an exercise in excess. Wrought iron imported from Italy, security guards in crisp uniforms, a curved driveway where Range Rovers and Porsches idled like predators at a watering hole. The annual tuition here cost more than most Nigerian families earned in 5 years. 8 million naira for 9-year-olds. But it was worth it, Marcus told himself. The best education money could buy, the right connections, the right future. As Chidi climbed out, Marcus barely looked up from his screen. Have a good day. Mm-hmm. The door slammed. No hug, no real goodbye, just transaction. Marcus watched his son walk through those gates. Designer backpack, limited edition sneakers, everything branded and expensive and somehow still empty, and felt nothing except relief that he could now focus on work. He didn't see what happened next. Didn't see Chidi shove past a younger student without apology. Didn't hear his son snap at the security guard who said, "Good morning." Didn't notice the way other parents' children gave Chidi space not out of respect, but out of something closer to wariness. Because Marcus Okonkwo had built an empire, yes, but he was raising a monster in a school uniform, and everyone could see it except him. The day moved like all his days moved, fast, efficient, profitable. Conference call at 9, strategy meeting at 10:30, working lunch with the legal team, every hour scheduled, every minute monetized, every second spent building something bigger, better, more impressive. His executive assistant, Temi, knocked on his office door at 2 p.m. Sir, Mrs. Okonkwo called again. Marcus's jaw tightened. His ex-wife, remarried now, living in London with her British husband and their new baby, the family she'd built after deciding Marcus was emotionally unavailable. Her words, as if emotions paid school fees. What does she want? She said you're not answering her messages, something about Chidi's behaviour. Tell her I'll call her back. He wouldn't. Temi hesitated at the door. Sir, she also said you're raising him to be hollow, like me, Marcus finished, not looking up from his laptop. Yes, I'm sure she did. That'll be all, Temi. The door closed. Marcus sat in his corner office. Glass walls, city views, everything visible, nothing revealed, and felt something twist in his chest. Something that might have been pain if he'd allowed himself to feel it. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Amara. You're turning our son into everything I left you for being. Call me. He deleted it. At exactly 3:45 p.m., Marcus did something unusual. The Singapore meeting had been moved to tomorrow, giving him a rare free afternoon. Instead of filling it with more work, he decided, on impulse, on instinct, on something he couldn't quite name, to pick up Chidi himself. Early. 20 minutes before dismissal. When was the last time he'd done that? Months? A year? He pulled up to Green Springs at 4:10 p.m., parking across the street from the main gate, where parents were already gathering in their luxury vehicles, waiting like well-dressed sharks. Marcus checked his phone, scrolled through emails, barely paying attention to the world outside his tinted windows. Then he looked up and saw something that didn't make sense. Outside the school gates, beyond the manicured hedges and imported stonework, past the gleaming cars and designer-dressed parents, sat his son. Not with other children, not with teachers, with her. A woman who didn't belong there, not by these gates, not in this neighborhood, not in the carefully curated world Marcus had built. She sat on a low concrete wall that bordered the street. A wooden tray balanced beside her, small paper cones of roasted groundnuts arranged in neat rows. Her wrapper was faded but clean, tied carefully at her waist. Her blouse had been mended at the shoulder. Her head tie was simple, practical, the kind his mother used to wear on market days. And Chidi who refused poor people food at breakfast, Chidi who wouldn't acknowledge the housekeeper, Chidi who Marcus was raising to be someone important, was sitting right next to her, eating groundnuts from a 5 naira paper cone, talking and laughing like they were old friends. Marcus's first emotion was alarm, sharp, immediate, protective. Who was this woman? How had she gotten close to his son? Was she a beggar? A scammer? Some opportunist who'd spotted an expensive school uniform and seen a payday? His second emotion was embarrassment. What would the other parents think? The Okoyes were 3 cars down. Their daughter was in Chidi's class. The Adeyemis were right there. He had business dealings with them. What would they say if they saw his son, the heir to a tech fortune, sitting on a street wall with a groundnut seller like some child from Mushin? The thought arrived unwanted, uncharitable, and uncomfortably revealing. Marcus opened his car door, ready to march over there, to pull his son away, to make this stop before anyone else noticed. But something made him pause. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, maybe the part of him that still remembered being young and uncertain. He stayed in the car, windows cracked just enough, and listened. The woman was talking to Chidi in Yoruba, her voice gentle but firm. The tone of someone who expected to be heard not because of authority, but because of truth. "You must greet Auntie Rose properly tomorrow," she was saying. "You made her feel small today." Chidi's voice smaller than Marcus had heard it in months. "But Papa says she's just—" "Your papa is a good man," the woman interrupted, not harshly, but with the kind of certainty that stopped arguments before they started. "But good manners will open doors money cannot. Rich or poor, respect is what makes people listen to you. Not your father's car, not your expensive shoes. You, your character, that is what makes you somebody." Marcus froze. Those words, that phrasing. Something about it felt familiar, like a song he'd forgotten the words to, but still remembered the melody. Chidi was quiet for a moment, actually thinking. When was the last time Marcus had seen his son think about something other than what he wanted? "Mama Ngozi," Chidi said. "Mama Ngozi," like they'd known each other for years. "Why do you sit here every day? Don't you get tired?" The woman, Mama Ngozi, laughed softly. "Ah, my boy, work is not something to be ashamed of. Every honest work has dignity. I sit here because this is my business. These groundnuts feed me. They keep my room paid. They keep me free." She paused. "Your father understands this, I think, even if he has forgotten." "You know my papa?" Another laugh, this one tinged with something Marcus couldn't identify. "I knew him when he was your size, when he wore slippers with holes and shared one textbook with 3 other children." Chidi's voice rose with disbelief. "My papa! No, Papa is rich. Papa has always been rich." "Your papa became rich," Mama Ngozi corrected gently. "There is a difference. And becoming rich is good, but staying good while becoming rich, that is the difficult part." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He climbed out of his car, slowly, quietly, moving closer but staying partially hidden behind a nearby car. He needed to hear this, needed to understand what was happening here. "Now listen," Mama Ngozi continued, handing Chidi another cone of groundnuts. "Tomorrow you will greet Auntie Rose properly. You will say, 'Good morning, Auntie,' and you will mean it. You will look at her face when you speak. And if you are feeling very brave, you will apologize for being rude today. But what if the other boys laugh at me? Then let them laugh. A fool's laughter is just noise. But a good man's respect, that will follow you forever." Chidi was nodding, actually listening, actually absorbing. Marcus's hands curled into fists. Who was this woman? What right did she have to teach his son anything? To offer advice, to correct behavior, to sit here like some kind of informal grandmother dispensing wisdom his son actually accepted? And more troubling, why was his son listening to her when he barely listened to his own father? The school bell rang. Children began flooding out of the gates, a river of navy blue uniforms and expensive accessories. Mama Ngozi stood, brushing groundnut shells from her wrapper, preparing to return to her sales. "Tomorrow, remember?" she said to Chidi, tapping his head affectionately. "Character first, money second, not the other way around." "Yes, Mama Ngozi." Marcus watched his son run toward the gates, then turned his attention fully to the woman. She was packing up her tray now, carefully arranging the remaining groundnuts, counting her money. Her movements were practiced, efficient, dignified. This wasn't desperation, this was discipline. But none of that mattered. She'd overstepped. She'd gotten too close. She'd influenced his son. Marcus straightened his jacket, put on his CEO face, the one that made board members nervous and competitors retreat, and walked toward her with purpose. "Excuse me," his voice cut through the afternoon noise like a blade. Mama Ngozi looked up slowly, meeting his eyes with a calmness that should have warned him but didn't. "Yes?" she said simply. "What exactly do you think you're doing with my son?" The question came out colder than he'd intended, sharp with accusation and barely restrained anger. Mama Ngozi studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, not nervous, not apologetic, but with something that looked almost like sadness. "I am teaching him," she said quietly, "what his school cannot." So tell me, when did we start believing that expensive schools could teach character? And if a groundnut seller can see what a CEO is blind to, who's really poor? Marcus Okonkwo pulled out his wallet with the casual arrogance of a man who believed every problem had a price tag. "How much?" he said, his voice low, controlled, the same tone he used in boardrooms when he was about to crush a negotiation. "To stop, whatever this is. To stay away from my son. Name your price." He expected fear. He expected stammering. He expected her to fold like everyone else did when confronted with his power and his money. What he got instead made his blood run cold. Mama Ngozi didn't even glance at the wallet. She just tilted her head slightly, studying his face the way you might study an old photograph that's gone blurry with time. Her eyes narrowed, then widened with recognition, and Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his expensive Italian shoes. "Marcus," she said softly, almost like a question. Then with more certainty, "Marcus Okonkwo from Mushin." The name hit him like a punch to the chest. Nobody, and I mean nobody, called him that anymore. Nobody knew he was from Mushin, the crowded Lagos neighborhood where laundry hung between buildings like prayer flags and 5 families shared one toilet. He'd spent 20 years burying that boy, erasing him from every biography, every interview, every carefully constructed story about his rise to success. "Mrs. Ngozi Adebayo," she continued, her voice gentle now, almost tender. "I taught you primary 3 at community primary school. You sat in the 3rd row, by the window, with the broken louvers." Marcus's mouth went dry. "You once insulted Joseph Bello because his feet were bare," she said, not accusing, just remembering. "Called him Bush Boy in front of the whole class. I made you kneel at the front and apologize to him properly. Do you remember what I told you that day?" He did. God help him, he did. Money can buy you shoes, Marcus, but it cannot buy you character. The day you forget that is the day you become truly poor. The memory came flooding back. The shame of kneeling, the heat of embarrassment burning his cheeks, the way Joseph had looked at him afterward, not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment. And Mrs. Adebayo standing there, not shouting, not punishing, just teaching. Marcus stumbled backward, his carefully constructed world tilting dangerously. I have to go, he managed, grabbing Chidi's hand too roughly. Come on, now! He practically dragged his son to the car, ignoring Chidi's protests, ignoring the confused looks from other parents, ignoring everything except the desperate need to escape the woman who'd just torn open a door he'd spent 2 decades sealing shut. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his penthouse windows again, staring at Lagos sprawled below him like a kingdom he'd conquered. But for the first time in years, he felt like an imposter. The city lights blurred, and suddenly he wasn't looking at Ikoyi anymore. He was seeing Mushin, the tight corridors, the zinc roofs, the way his mother would count coins by candlelight during power cuts, trying to figure out how to pay his school fees. He'd promised himself he'd never go back to that, never be that powerless again, so he'd become powerful, ruthlessly so. But somewhere along the way, what had he become? At 2 a.m., Marcus did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened the old wooden box his mother had left him when she died. Inside were photographs, report cards, a few handwritten letters. And there, yellowed but intact, was a class photo from 1992. Primary 3, third row, by the window. And standing at the side, one hand on a student's shoulder, was a younger Mrs. Adebayo. The same gentle smile, the same steady eyes. Marcus's hands trembled as he held the photograph. The next morning, he told himself he'd forget about it, bury it again, move on. But at 4 p.m., he found himself parking across from the school gates again. Early, watching. And there it was, the same scene that had shattered his carefully controlled world yesterday. Chidi, sitting with Mama Ngozi, laughing about something, completely at ease in a way Marcus never saw at home. His son was helping her arrange the groundnut cones, listening as she spoke, nodding thoughtfully. Marcus watched for 20 minutes, hidden behind tinted windows, and saw something that cut deeper than any business failure ever had. His son respected her, genuinely respected her. In 3 weeks of sitting with a groundnut seller, Chidi had learned something Marcus couldn't teach him in 9 years of providing everything money could buy. But why? What did she have that he didn't? The answer arrived unwanted. Presence, attention, truth. Over the next week, Marcus became obsessed, though he'd never admit it. He'd arrive early, park at a distance, and watch. He saw Chidi greet the school security guard properly now, saw him say thank you to the woman selling pure water, saw him share his snacks with a younger student. Small changes, tiny shifts, but unmistakable. At home, things were changing too. One evening, Patience the housekeeper dropped a glass while serving dinner. It shattered across the marble floor. Marcus braced himself for Chidi's usual response, the eye roll, the complaint, the casual cruelty. Instead, his son jumped up and said, "Don't worry, Auntie Patience, I'll help you clean it." The housekeeper froze, shocked. Marcus froze, stunned. Mama Ngozi says accidents happen to everyone, Chidi explained, kneeling to carefully pick up the larger pieces, and that helping people shows more strength than judging them. Patience's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. Marcus just stared at his son like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. That weekend, Marcus made a decision. Sunday evening, after Chidi was asleep, he drove to Ajagunle, a neighborhood he hadn't entered in 15 years, a place he'd tried to forget existed. The streets were narrow, crowded, vibrant with life that happened despite poverty, not because of it. Generators hummed, food sellers called out, children played football with a deflated ball. He found her address through means he wouldn't examine too closely, a combination of old school records and expensive private investigators. Mama Ngozi lived in a single room in a faded yellow building, 3rd floor, door slightly ajar to catch the evening breeze. Marcus stood outside that door for 5 full minutes, his hand raised to knock, his heart pounding harder than it did before any business presentation. Finally, he knocked. "Come in," her voice called. The room was small but immaculate, a narrow bed in one corner, a small kerosene stove, a wooden table with 2 chairs, books, dozens of books, stacked carefully on a shelf made from old crates. On the wall, faded certificates, Bachelor of Education, Teachers Training College, commendations from the Ministry of Education. Mama Ngozi sat at the table, reading by lamplight. She looked up, unsurprised to see him. "I wondered when you would come," she said simply, gesturing to the empty chair. Marcus sat, feeling like a schoolboy again, nervous and exposed. "Why?" he asked, the question bursting out before he could refine it. "Why do you care about my son? What do you want from me?" She smiled that same gentle smile. "I want nothing from you, Marcus. I do this because it is right. Your boy is not bad. He is lost, like many children who have everything except attention." She paused, letting the words land. "You were lost once, too, but you found your way. Then you forgot the path." "I built an empire," Marcus said defensively. "I provide everything for him. The best schools. The best—" "Everything except yourself," she interrupted quietly. The words hung between them like an accusation and an invitation. "I don't—" Marcus's voice cracked. "I don't know how to be what he needs. My own father left. My mother worked herself to death trying to give me opportunities. I promised myself my son would never struggle, would never want for anything." "But you created a different kind of poverty," Mama Ngozi said gently. "Poverty of connection, poverty of values, poverty of presence." She leaned forward. "Money cannot hug your child, Marcus. Success cannot teach him kindness. Your empire cannot show him how to be a good man." Marcus felt something break inside his chest, something that had been cracking for years, but he'd been too busy to notice. "I see him watching you," she continued. "Looking for his father and finding only a businessman, reaching for connection and touching only achievement. He is becoming you, Marcus. Not the you that was, but the you that you fear you've become." "Then help me," Marcus whispered, and was shocked to find his eyes wet. "Please, I don't want him to be like me. I want him to be better." Mama Ngozi reached across the table and took his hand, her palm rough from years of work, warm with the kind of compassion money couldn't manufacture. "Then be better," she said simply. "Show him the man you were before success made you forget. Show him mushin, show him struggle, show him that you climbed not to escape your past, but to honor it." But here's what Marcus didn't know yet. The real test was still coming, because 3 days later, his son would make a choice that would expose everything Marcus had built. And the question wasn't whether Marcus had changed, it was whether he'd changed enough. Would you risk everything you'd built to save who you used to be? 3 days after that conversation in Ajagunle, the call came that would test everything Marcus thought he'd learned. It was 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. Marcus was in a strategy meeting with the Singapore investors, the deal he'd been chasing for 6 months, the one that would triple his company's valuation, the one that would cement his legacy as one of Africa's most successful tech entrepreneurs. His phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. He ignored it. This meeting was too important. Then his assistant Temi knocked on the glass door, her face pale, urgent. "Sir, it's the school. They say it's an emergency." The room went silent. The investors exchanged glances. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Excuse me," he said, already standing, already knowing that whatever came next would matter more than any deal ever could. The headmistress's voice was cold and clipped when he called back. "Mr. Okonkwo, we need you to come to the school immediately. There's been an incident involving Chidi." 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in the headmistress's office, wood-panelled, air-conditioned, decorated with awards and certificates that cost more than most Nigerians earned in a year. Across from him sat Mrs. Olumide, the headmistress, her expression somewhere between disappointed and disgusted. And beside her, looking small and defiant, was Chidi. "Your son," Mrs. Olumide began, "was caught mocking Timothy Adeleke, one of our scholarship students, for wearing counterfeit sneakers. He called him a poor faker in front of his entire class. Timothy is devastated. His parents are considering withdrawing him from the school." The words hit Marcus like ice water. This was it, the test, the moment that would reveal whether anything had actually changed or if the past 3 weeks had been just performance, just surface. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. Chidi's eyes were red, his jaw set in that stubborn way that Marcus recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror his entire life. But underneath the defiance was something else. Fear, shame, confusion. "Chidi," Marcus said quietly, "is this true?" His son's lip trembled. "But Papa, you said people like that don't matter. You said we're better than—" "I never said that," Marcus interrupted, then stopped, because that wasn't true, was it? He'd never said those exact words, but he'd lived them, shown them, taught them through every dismissive gesture, every ignored greeting, every time he'd treated service workers like furniture. His son had been watching, learning, becoming. Mrs. Olumide cleared her throat. "Mr. Okonkwo, given your son's previous behavioural issues and now this incident, we're considering suspension. This is not the standard we expect at Green Springs." And there it was, the moment Marcus had built his entire life to avoid. Public shame, the exposure of inadequacy, the revelation that despite all his money and success, he'd failed at the thing that mattered most. The old Marcus, the one from a week ago, would have defended his son, blamed the school, threatened legal action, written a check big enough to make the problem disappear. But instead, Marcus heard himself say something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. "You're right," Mrs. Olumide blinked. "I'm sorry." "You're right," Marcus repeated, his voice steady now. "My son behaved terribly, and that's because I've been teaching him terribly, not with words but with actions, with silence, with absence." He turned to Chidi. "We're going to fix this, together, but first you're going to apologise to Timothy, properly. Not because I'm forcing you, but because it's right." What happened next, Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. That afternoon, he didn't return to the Singapore meeting, didn't call to reschedule, didn't send Temi to handle it. Instead, he took Chidi's hand, really held it, not just guided it, and they walked together to the school gates where Mama Ngozi sat with her groundnut tray. She looked up as they approached, her eyes moving from Marcus to Chidi, reading the story written on both their faces. "Mama Ngozi," Chidi said, his voice small, "I did something bad." She didn't speak, just waited, giving him space to carry his own truth. "I made fun of a boy for being poor, like you told me not to. Like you said my papa used to do." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." Mama Ngozi opened her arms, and Chidi collapsed into them, crying in a way Marcus hadn't seen since he was very small. She held him, not saying anything, just letting him feel what he needed to feel. Then she looked at Marcus over his son's head, and in her eyes was a question. What now? What will you do with this moment? Marcus knelt beside them both, there on the dusty pavement outside Nigeria's most expensive school. His Zegna suit getting dirty, his watch catching sunlight, his pride finally breaking open into something that looked like humility. "Mama Ngozi," he said, "I need your help, not just for him, for me, for us both." Marcus asked Mama Ngozi what she wanted, not what he thought she needed, not what would make him look generous, but what she actually wanted for herself. Her answer was simple. "I want to teach again, properly. Children like Chidi and children like you they all need the same thing. To know their value doesn't come from their bank account." So Marcus funded the Adebayo Learning Centre. But here's what made it different. He didn't put his name on it, didn't announce it on social media, didn't use it for PR or tax benefits. He kept Mama Ngozi as the director, the face, the heart of it. And every Saturday, Marcus and Chidi went there together, not as donors visiting their charity, but as students learning alongside children from Ajagunle and Mushin and every forgotten corner of Lagos. Rich kids and poor kids, sitting under a mango tree, learning that manners matter more than money. That character opens doors wealth cannot. That respect is the only currency that never loses value. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning, Marcus watched his son teaching a younger boy, a child from the slums with torn shorts and hope in his eyes, how to greet elders properly. Chidi used Mama Ngozi's exact method, patient, kind, without shame. Mama Ngozi stood beside Marcus, both of them watching the next generation learn what they had almost forgotten. "He's becoming a fine young man," she said softly. "Because of you," Marcus replied. "You saw what I'd forgotten, that manners and money aren't the same thing." She shook her head gently. "No, Marcus, because you remembered. You chose to remember. That's the harder thing." Marcus smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one he used in boardrooms. "I lost the Singapore deal, you know. They went with another company. And I don't care, not the way I thought I would." He looked at his son, really looked at him. "I was building an empire but losing a family, making money but raising a stranger." Mama Ngozi squeezed his arm. "Now you're building something better, something that will outlast any company." As they prepared to leave that afternoon, Chidi ran up to Marcus, breathless and happy. "Papa, can we stop by Uncle Ibrahim's house? I want to greet him properly." Uncle Ibrahim, the gateman at their building, the man Chidi used to ignore, used to walk past like he was invisible. Marcus knelt to his son's level, looked him in the eyes. "Yes, let's do that." They walked out hand in hand, father and son, both of them learning that the greatest wealth isn't what you accumulate, but who you become. Because here's the truth Mama Ngozi knew and Marcus finally learned. You can buy your son an expensive education, but you cannot buy him character. You can give him everything except what matters most: yourself, your time, your truth. Your willingness to admit that success without values is just expensive emptiness. The groundnut seller taught a CEO's son manners, but really, she taught them both how to be human again. Now I want to hear from you, because this story isn't just about Marcus and Chidi, it's about all of us. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one small act of kindness someone showed you that changed how you see the world? Maybe it was a teacher, a stranger, someone society told you didn't matter, but they taught you something money never could. Share your story. Let's honour the Mumangozis in our own lives. And if this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe. Because every week we bring you African folk tales with modern twists that remind us who we really are. Your story matters. Share it below. I'll be reading every single comment.